Hey, welcome to Phrase by Phrase, where we are studying the Bible one phrase at a time. Today, we're going to be looking at James chapter 3, verse 14c through verse 15. All right, and we're looking at the characteristics of worldly wisdom. And James goes on to describe those characteristics as selfish ambition. So this is the person who wants to succeed, but not for the sake of others. Their goals are self-centered, and they live out their relationships from a lustful orientation. Remember, a lust orientation is the opposite of a love orientation. A lust orientation is arrows in. Everything is in upon itself. Life is about me, what I want, when I want it, the way I want it. The opposite of that is a love orientation, where it's arrows out, that we live for others, we live for God, and we live for others. So this person lives out their relationships with that lustful orientation, that extreme selfishness where they, like a black hole, want to bring everything into themselves. It's about them. And so James says that these characteristics are in a person's heart. If you look at verse 14, he says, "But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart," describes it that way. In other words, these are internal attitudes that are part of the person's nature, all right? And they naturally spill out in their relationships. And it's important to understand that, because James is contrasting the two approaches to life, gentleness versus selfish ambition and sharp zeal. And what he's saying is that these things are in a person's heart. So we're not at this point focusing on specific behaviors, all right, but rather the heart condition from which the behavior springs. So a person with godly wisdom doesn't just act in a gentle way, but rather gentleness characterizes the condition of their heart, and their actions flow out of that disposition, all right? And likewise, a person with worldly wisdom doesn't just act in a zealous, ambitious way, but rather those things characterize their heart condition, and their actions flow out of that disposition. And that's why this issue of wisdom is a way to measure the reality of one's faith, all right? If one professes to know the Lord, but their heart is filled with bitter jealousy and selfish ambition, then their profession is a lie. And we will know the condition of their heart by their behavior. And so that's the characteristic of worldly wisdom. Then he talks about the source of worldly wisdom. He says in verse 15, "This wisdom is not that which comes down from above, but is earthly, natural, demonic." So it comes from three sources. He says it's earthly, which means on the earth. So it's having its roots, instead of having its roots in the realms of heaven, it's limited to what can only be produced by human nature. It's natural, meaning it's soulish. It comes from human intellect, human will, human emotion. There's no spiritual origin to it. And then it's demonic, which means that it's of the devil. And that sounds diabolical, you know, like the kind of thing that we would avidly avoid. But demonic wisdom doesn't always come with cloak and dagger. Remember when Jesus was speaking to Peter about the fact that he was going to go to the cross and sacrifice himself, and Peter was trying to dissuade him and to say to him, "Lord, you cannot do that." And Jesus rebuked him and told him that he was speaking the words of Satan. Now, Peter was just speaking out of love and concern for the Lord. So it didn't look satanic. But this is what it says in Matthew 16:23. "But he turned and said to Peter, 'Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are not setting your mind on God's interests, but man.'" So he's saying that to be demonic in nature is to set your interests on man rather than on God, on what I want and the way that I want it, to set my interests on what's best for me rather than what glorifies God. He's saying that's demonic ways of thinking, and that's where that earthly wisdom comes from. So, hope that helps you. We're going to continue to unpack this as we go through this passage of Scripture. I hope you join me next time as we study the Bible phrase by phrase.